thanks for coming to my talk, starting a Thinky Studio with a stranger. I'm Kate. I'm a game designer by trade. I've been working in the industry for around 14 years now. I am also a bit of an indie game generalist person, so I do a little bit of programming, a little bit of art as well, but by no means to professional level. And I'm also an extrovert, which I say because I think it gives a little context to this talk. I really thrive working in a team environment. I enjoy collaborating, and I really don't thrive when I'm stuck in a room on my own for an extended period of time. So this is where it all started, me about age 11. I think this is about when I first started trying to recruit people onto my creative projects. So I remember going to secondary school, trying to pitch ideas for like some kind of online teen magazine. I don't even know what the idea was. To some of my friends at school, it failed quite badly. They thought I was quite weird, probably got me a bit of a reputation as a nerd for the rest of my school life. And later on, as an older teen, I also spent some time making like a Neopets inspired virtual pet site and recruiting people off online forums to try and help me with that, which did get further, but still. And then skipping ahead a little bit to university, I was studying game design and I joined this competition called Dare to be Digital with a student team. We won the competition, and from that we released the game Mush on Xbox Live, ended up winning a BAFTA. And I think that was when it really kind of solidified the goal in my mind that I wanted to be an indie developer, and that was the career path I wanted to take. Unfortunately, after we did the first project together, the team kind of dispersed. We'd finished our degrees, people wanted to get jobs with incomes for some reason, and I didn't have a programmer anymore. So I didn't have any way to try and put together a demo, especially with the tools available back then. So yeah, I didn't really get anywhere with pitching. Like I tried to pitch more games to Microsoft. They're like, where's the demo? So I gave up on that. I took a brief detour of maybe 10 years doing other jobs. I did UX design at like appointment booking software. I worked as a game designer, senior game designer, and ultimately game lead on at a startup called MojiWorks, making games for Snapchat and Facebook Instant Games. And I've also worked on quite a number of different projects for educational games and games for children and other mobile projects. And pretty much the whole time I was doing those different jobs, I was going around this little thought pattern where I knew that I wasn't doing exactly what I wanted to be doing. And I knew that in order to do it, I needed to get through that challenge of like having a prototype and having a demo. So I would try it out. I would, make a start on trying to build something and improve my programming skills. And then I would get to this conclusion, like making games on your own is actually really difficult. It requires so many different skills. And also sometimes you just need that extra person to like bounce ideas around and get some fresh input. And I would kind of feel like a little bit of a failure for finding this so difficult. Like I would look at famous, successful solo indie developers and think, if they can do it, why can't I do it? It sounds so simple. But then ultimately, I'd kind of come to the conclusion that I need to find a collaborator. So especially, hopefully, somebody who could code better than me, could help me work on more innovative ideas than what I could do on my own. But then I would have no idea how to go about doing that. So you would think maybe that after a certain amount of time in the industry, I might have met someone through work that I could work with, but I always came into the same problem, which is people who have the right skills are generally the people who already have jobs and therefore don't have the free time to work on side projects. I think that working in startups probably made this even harder for me because the teams tend to be very small. You don't meet like a large number of people, and they also tend to be quite emotionally invested in the startup that they're already working in. Maybe don't want to do another startup on the side of that startup. So I was kind of pretty stuck. And then up to 2022, I had left my job mainly due to like mental health in the pandemic. I'd been freelancing and doing contract work. And then I joined the Astro Fellowship program, which I'm sure some people are familiar with here. That was 18 months that I then had funded to kind of do two things, like develop new ideas for games and also just improve some of my coding skills. And I kind of started it off here. I was like, right, I'm just going to get stuck in. I'm going to build some prototypes, see what happens. I made loads of Thinky game prototypes. I don't know, I think I put 10 on my itch page in the first few months. I was kind of doing them maybe 1 to 2 weeks prototype, just like churning them out. And I got to maybe halfway through the fellowship and I started to think, okay, this is actually quite hard. I'm getting a bit fatigued with just generating all these ideas and generally feeling that struggle of working alone for an extended period of time. So I had chats to my mentor about it, and I came to the conclusion, as usual, that I need to find a collaborator and that I could spend the rest of my fellowship kind of just doubling down and focusing on trying to find somebody to work with. So the first question I needed to ask was, what does my co-founder even look like? At first, I didn't have anything very specific in mind. I just knew that I needed them to be able to code, preferably better than me, so that we could work on more interesting things. And also for them to be a nice person, because half of it was I just wanted someone to collaborate with, to come up with some fresh ideas, give me some new inputs. So that was my starting point. And the next question is, where are they? How am I going to find them? I knew that they probably weren't in Norwich where I live because there's about 10 other game developers here and I already know all of them and I share an office with like 9 of them. So that was already a no-go, trying to meet them in person in my area. But one of the things that had helped me since leaving work that I'd ended up doing was spending a bit of time on game development subreddits. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of Reddit, but I had found it quite helpful just to kind of lurk around on the forums and especially like answering beginner questions and helping people out and trying to give them a bit of advice, always like just a nice thing to be able to do with your time. So I wasn't necessarily seeing that many experienced developers posting on Reddit, but I thought I might as well give it a go because I don't know what options I have. So I made this post just that I was looking for a collaborator to do some game jams or like small test projects with. So the first thing that happened talking to people on Reddit was that I quickly found people will try to recruit you a lot to their own project, their dream game, or maybe something they've already got underway. So that was the first thing to add to my checklist, is that I need someone who's going to come up with new ideas with me. But I had a lot of different calls with people to just chat to them, get to know them a bit. And I ended up doing a few different test projects with different people. So these usually happened over the course of a few weeks, kind of on and off while they were generally working in another job at the same time. I made this first one on the top left, which was where you play as a ghost manipulating objects around the house to influence your friend, who's the bear, to try and figure out the right sequence of interactions that you have to do to get the bear up and out of the house. So I made that with an Australian developer. The one at the bottom was a physics-based music puzzle where you kind of bounce around these little musical seeds and then you try and time it to match the melody that you're given. And then on the top right, I also made this game with a friend that I'd actually met in person in the end at a game dev event in Spain. And we took a bit longer with this project because it was going quite well. It was a first-person cat game where you have to figure out how to get various items around the house. We actually put that one up on Steam and showcased it a bit, which went pretty well. But in the end, I'd done all these projects and ultimately none of them did turn into long-term collaborations. But it did help me to figure out a little bit more of what I was looking for. First thing, time zones. Australia, too awkward. Although we're all quite used to kind of working asynchronously now with remote work, there's definitely a limit, and Australia is definitely past the limit. And then compatible collaboration approach, which sounds pretty obvious, but essentially what happened was one of the projects I did, the person was kind of too attached to their own ideas. So we ended up, when we couldn't agree what to do, we would just make separate little prototypes to prove out our ideas and not really agree. And that didn't feel like a super healthy dynamic. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I had a collaborator who would be like, oh, puzzle design, oh, that's your problem. You have to figure that out. Just tell me what to do, which again wasn't that useful for what I was looking for. So it just kind of highlighted that I needed to find the right balance, and that's can be quite a subtle thing to look for. And then lastly, I needed someone who did have some ambitions to go into indie development as like a proper career at some point. So one of my collaborators was about to start a family, another who was maybe just looking for some stable income. And I realized that, although that was fine for those early test projects, it was potentially a bit of a waste of time if they didn't have any long-term goal to do that. So I kind of got to this point after the 3 collaborations, which I think had maybe taken place over 6 months or so in the end. I started to feel like Reddit's not really working out. Maybe I'm just going to put a pin in that. Maybe just verging on to going for another loop around. And then I saw this post. So I was cautiously optimistic, seeing that there was another experienced person looking for an indie partner. I could see already quite a lot of kind of green flags in this post that I looked at. They obviously can code, they've got a AAA background. So that was a big tick. They mentioned that the eventual aim would be maybe to make money on the side, which I read as they do want to do indie development, but they're realistic about how easy it is. The collaboration they talked about was 50-50, which felt like a good sign. And they also sounded like they'd had a similar experience to me in trying to be roped into other people's dream games. So I knew that they weren't coming at it from that angle. And yeah, we had a call and I established that they are quite a nice person and they lived in a fairly suitable time zone. So they are based in California, which, is not necessarily ideal still, but seemed more manageable. And she did have plans to move back to the UK at some point. So we did a prototype together, this person who's called Sky, and the collaboration went really well. The concept we came up with was quite depressing. It was this game about scrapbooking and sorting out memories, figuring out where they go into the scrapbook, and but also memory loss. So you're having to leave things behind, and maybe you're going through like a mental health problem with losing memory. Anyway, we didn't go too far with that concept in the end, but yeah, the collaboration went really well. It was pretty clear that each of us just having the level of experience that we had, not just in our fields, but also in team management and project management, just meant we could work together like in a very seamless kind of professional way. And then we got accepted onto the Wings Elevate program. So this was an accelerator that would give us 3 months to build a demo and a little bit of funding as well, so we could hire a freelance artist. I think we got accepted maybe about April last year, and we knew that we had a few months to prepare, and then we would have around 3 months to do the accelerator and build the demo. So my problem was solved. I'd found a team, I got the prototype. That's done, right? Well, obviously not, because now we had to figure out how to actually work together on like a more serious basis and try to build a proper demo. I don't know if this graphic makes that much sense, but I was trying to summarize the 3 biggest challenges that we faced over that period of kind of more serious development. They pretty much all come back to time, though. Time, there's just not enough of it. It's pretty hard to organize within the situation that we were in. I know it's a problem with remote work generally, but even more so when you throw time zones and other work commitments into the mix. So just to explain this a bit, that essentially over the course of a week, we would have maybe 2 hours, 2 different hour slots where we could actually talk to each other synchronously on a call. There were kind of other bits where we might be able to chat on Slack very briefly, but more or less our work schedules and being awake schedules were just not very compatible. So yeah, then the question becomes, how do you work with that kind of constraint? So some of the things that we did to try and overcome this challenge, although yeah, we still did find it difficult and we kept kind of bumping up against this problem. First of all, just being really efficient and prioritizing very harshly with those little segments of time that we did have. That can be quite tricky because you often end up only talking about immediate blockers and trying to find time to talk about stuff like what's our potential vision for this company if it goes ahead, what's our business strategy, all that kind of stuff can really fall off the agenda a little bit. So we would just have to make sure being pretty harsh about what we could spend time talking about, but then also just scheduling ahead, like, okay, in 3 weeks we're going to have this half hour to talk about our business plan, because if we don't do that, it'll never happen. Doubling down a lot on the asynchronous communication that we did have. I was writing a lot of very long Slack messages, lots of threads, kind of trying to leave a summary each day that's very organized, that then the other person could come in and respond to everything quite methodically, because you really don't want to be missing things when you don't have that synchronous time to figure out what's happening. And a lot of use of Miro. This is just one of many, many Miro boards that we generated to just do this kind of quite quick documentation and just keeping it relevant. I'm not a big fan of documentation in general, so this was not my natural way to do things, but it was just a necessity with the situation we were in. And another thing is just, go back a bit, making sure that we flagged when things were starting to get miscommunicated, because normally, I guess if you're having a conversation with someone in person, you can kind of tell if your point's not coming across or you're getting misunderstood. When there's a delay of 1 day in between every reply, you can't really afford for things, it'd be like a week before you've actually figured out what the other person's trying to say. So we just had to get very good making a lot of conscious effort to identify if that was starting to happen as early as possible, so we could just book in like that 10-minute slot to clear up that one issue that's somehow got past us. And then patience, which is, again, maybe not my natural approach to things, but especially the times when, I was fortunate enough to be working on this full-time thanks to the fellowship program for some of the development period, and the rest of the team weren't necessarily. We, as well as Sky working on the code and doing her full-time job, we had hired a freelance artist, Ellie, who was also doing other work. So we just had to try and be really realistic about what we could achieve. And with that, also just being as open as possible about any frustrations that might be coming up, any potential burnout that might be, starting to arise. I think, again, that combination when you don't know someone, because, I'd never met them and I'd only ever spoken to her in the context of talking about the game dev. And you're also having very little crossover time. There's really no way to know what's going on with them. So we just had to be very conscious of that and make sure that we were making a little bit of time to check in and be open about what's going on in our lives. I think that's part of why this collaboration worked really well as well, just because we both are quite open and honest people. So we were able to kind of build that connection. So since we started around last February, I think, we went through the accelerator, we finished the demo, we've got a Steam page up, we've been to a number of showcases. We even won a couple of awards last month while we were at GDC. And we finally met in person at GDC a few weeks ago, which was amazing because we had a whole week to chat about all the stuff that, just hadn't had time for, and also to get to know each other a bit better. So yeah, I feel like the hardest bit of finding the right co-founder is behind me now. We just have the next hard part of trying to get a publisher and another hard part of trying to make a good game. If I had to summarize my advice for anyone that's in a similar situation to where I was at the start of last year, the first thing would be, you never know where a good collaborator might come from. You have to stay quite open-minded. Even Reddit can surprise you. There's a lot of people lurking on there. So just always explore every avenue that you can. Secondly, that it is a process of trial and error. You don't really know until you try to work with someone whether it'll work out. They might seem really good on paper, but for some reason they just don't turn out to be the right person, or maybe vice versa. And yeah, it's important to know when to call it quits as well. If it's not working out, that might just not be compatible, and it's not, it's not necessarily saying anything about you or them. It might just be not the right fit. And then finally, it's okay if you don't want to do it alone. It's not a reflection on you. It's not the right way for everybody. I've had to kind of accept that I'm not the best at solo work, and that I work, as I said at the start, I just work better in a team. I am quite extroverted and I get a lot of energy from collaborating with people. And it is possible to find the right person, even if it ends up being an internet stranger. Thank you, that's my talk. And yes, also wishlist our game piece together.
Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you. It was wonderful. I love your point about like, because I think there are so many people who like maybe they can make a little game or whatever, and they can design great puzzles or whatever, and they get it in their head like, oh, I'm a solo developer, I can do everything, I can make the biggest game. I fall into that trap as well. Uh, it's nice to kind of have a reminder that like, you know, you do have to work with people, and even some of the people we think of as like solo developers, they, you know, they work with so many people on their games. So it's great to hear that. I had a question for you that I would like to ask. So you mentioned using Reddit. I guess the first part of the question is, was that a specific like subreddit you were like looking for particular people? And then my other part of the question is, do you have other resources for finding people? Anything you would suggest?
Yeah, so the subreddit I think that I was posting on was r/INAT, the I Need a Team subreddit, which is also where my co-founder I think posted in the end, which I think is the best one to look in. And I do think there are more people lurking and not posting than you think who are maybe more like serious developers. Other resources, it's tough because, you know, one thing that people always recommend is going to game jams, but I had been doing that my whole career as well, and generally finding that people come and jam and then like they go back to their job.
Mm.
So yeah, I can't think of what else I tried. I think I did also try to join various Discord communities, but yeah, I think the Reddit sub works because it is very much set up for that format of finding collaborators.
Right, you don't have to like filter for people who are in the same position as you because you know they're in the same
Yeah,
position because they're in that subreddit. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a great way
yeah.
of thinking about it. Um, Alrighty, if no other questions pop up, uh, all right, we'll say thank you to Kate again. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful talk. We're gonna set up for the next. Oh no, there's a break now. There's a break. We get half an hour break, and then the next talk will be after that. So see you all then. There's lots of thanks coming through in the chat. Great talk, etc., etc. Oh, and of course, if anybody has any additional questions, please head over to. Oh, there might be a question here actually that we could ask quickly. I'd love to know if you and Sky had any strategies for dealing with disagreements. There we go. That's a good question.
That is a good question. Do you know, in terms of the game development, I don't think it really came up because I think we're both so used to working in a team environment, and you know, kind of just at the level of seniority that we both are in our careers. I think we just see it, you know, that kind of thing. It's just part of the process, so no one's taking anything personally, and it's just like trying to justify why we do this or that decision. But I think we also did. Have a bit of an implicit understanding of like, because I'm on design and Sky's on code, like we also have our areas that we're willing to trust each other. I think we did put a lot of trust in each other to like be able to vouch for our different disciplines if there was something where we didn't agree.
That's really nice. I would like. I wonder what the experience is like if it's like two designers like paired up, or like
Yeah.
does it then become a bit more? Is there a bit more friction then?
Yeah, I think that's what I meant about trying to find that balance, because I don't want to work with a programmer who's like, I don't care about the design, but I'm also like, I still, yeah, you still need to understand who's ultimately got responsibility for which area. I mean, I'm saying this, she might completely disagree.
Sure, she doesn't. Thank you for that question, Shavine, and thank you once again, Kate.